Hey everyone, welcome so much to another installment of our series Data Science in 30 Minutes. So I'm Michael Lee, I'm the founder of the Data Incubator. For those of you who don't know, we run a fellowship for PhDs and master students, really helping folks who are looking to enter the data science industry. It's completely free for the fellows to get in. And if you're interested, you can apply at www.thedataincubator.com. We also do corporate training for sort of Fortune 500 companies who are looking to augment their data science talent. So you can also find out about that at our website, thedataincubator.com. So today I'm actually super excited. This is the first time we've done a DS30 in person.
Are you serious? I'm the first?
You are the first.
Oh my God, I thought this was like an option because I was like, we're in the same city. It's so much more fun if we actually talk in person. Why should I call him from my office 10 blocks away?
Well, yeah. Well, you're the first person who's taken us up on this option. So, this is a regular seminar we do. It's about, we spend 30 minutes talking about a really interesting topic in data science with a really interesting person. So just so you know, some of the past participants we've had are Becky Tucker, who is a data scientist at Netflix, Jess Stroth, VP of data at Quantopian, Holden Karau, who is an engineer at IBM and one of the core contributors to Apache Spark, and Sam Swift, who's the VP of data science at Betterment and also a former TDI fellow. Now, one last thing before I introduce you to today's mystery speaker. So you can pose questions in the YouTube chat area. So you're probably watching this on YouTube. You'll see a chat area on the right. You have to be logged into YouTube to do this, but if you are, you can pose questions. We're going to pick out a question or two towards the end and answer them. So start asking those questions. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Tricia Wang, who is the co-founder of Sudden Compass. And why don't you give us a brief intro about your background?
My background, yes. Well, I call myself a data science loving tech ethnographer. And no one knows what an ethnographer does, so I'll just have to say what we do is we study human beings, human behavior, and we understand their emotions, and their stories. And what I'm interested in is making sure that we can create mathematical models of those emotions. So I'm really interested in making sure how do we abstract out what we're seeing qualitatively in terms of stories and emotions, and making sure we create the best kind of data models. And so what we do as a company is we advise organizations, enterprises, institutions on how to really scale up a big data practice and create a data culture, but where it's very human-centered. And we teach them how to move at the speed of their customer. And we say every company wants to move at the speed of their customer. It's like who's not going to deny that they are customer obsessed and customer centric. But companies are really struggling to get there because they're just overwhelmed with quantitative data. And everyone says they have it, but everyone is struggling on how to turn it into actionable insights. I mean, did you see that Gartner study that just came out that said like 91% of executives are not seeing the results from their big data investments, which is a crazy number. But if you think about it from our perspective, it's not crazy. We're surprised the number is not higher because the way we see companies implementing data science is that they're doing it completely disconnected from the humans, from qualitative work, and it's completely being siloed off, and people are treating it as a magical tool. And then they blame big data. And I'm like, no, it's not data scientists' fault. It's not big data's fault, but it's the way we're using data. So we work with a lot of companies.
So you said something. You said something there, and I want to tap into that. Data science is kind of very quantitative. It's not about numbers, but your background, and I think what you're talking about, and the services your company provides, it's actually very human-centered. It's ethnographic. It's personal. It's these sort of stories. How do you combine those two things? How do you think about that?
Well, we say you have to combine it. I mean, the problem with companies when they only say we can solve your business problem through qualitative measures, my perspective is like, how can you? You're working with an enterprise that needs to make decisions at scale. You're going to tell your executives, I did a qualitative study off of 10 people, 100 people, or a survey off of 1,000, and you expect them to make a decision, and you have no mathematical model to prove that out at scale. That's a problem. So doing that is problematic. But then you have data scientists where they're like, we're going to tell a company to make a decision based off of millions of data points. And I'm like, you have a lot of whats, but you have no idea why this behavior is happening, and you're going to tell some executive to make this kind of investment, and you're going to expect this kind of growth. That is ridiculous. But it's only when you combine the qualitative and the quantitative, and what we rebranded qualitative thick data. It's a term that I made up, which is the topic by, I think, one of the topics we're addressed today. And I want everyone to use this term because I really was struggling to make qualitative UX research, design thinking, all that, sticky feely social science stuff sound really valuable and legitimate and credible in a room of data scientists and executives who were saying to me, oh, your data set is so small and puny. What am I supposed to do with that? So then I'm like, well, fine. If you think your data is big, mine is, and then, oh, it's more about data. So I think qualitative, data had just like a branding issue. So I rebranded it, and I want the world to use it. It's part of my mission to evangelize for our community to integrate big data and thick data. And it's one of the things I would love to talk about today in our webinar is one of the frameworks that we've created to enable organizations to communicate with big and thick data in a way that is that gives a shared language across silos, and ensures that even if you're not data literate, even if you're not like some fancy trained data scientist who's gone through your amazing program, they can still understand.
Thank you for that.
Language. Yeah, I mean, you guys spin out some of the best data scientists in the industry, and I wish everyone would go through your guys' program.
Thank you for the free plug. Love that.
I will keep plugging away.
No, so I'm really fascinated, right? I think you're right. I think that there's only so much a data can tell you, right? You see a correlation, and as a data scientist, you sort of know that, well, correlation doesn't imply causation. It could be other factors. You can sometimes sort of naturally tell a story about that, but oftentimes that story, you either can't tell a story because there's
incomplete.
None that's apparent, or you're telling
Right.
the wrong story because
Right.
it's you're relying on some sort of preconceived bias as opposed to actually talking to the individuals that this correlation's about.
Exactly.
Right. So I've always thought that like that UX research component, that kind of talking to people component is really important for understanding the why, and having at least a qualitative basis on which to kind of fulfill your knowledge and confirm the hypotheses you get from data exploration. But do you see it going the other way around?
Absolutely.
So what I'm saying is data using qualitative methods to generate hypotheses, which you then test quantitatively.
Yeah, you actually should be going back and forth. Ideally, so that's the practice that we created. It's called the unlock, and we'll talk about the framework in a bit, where you can see that we create a sprint-based practice where you should be doing whatever possible in a sprint-driven way, jumping between different kinds of big data methods to thick data methods to get to your the most complete story to answer your business question. And I think that's why you and I bonded. You and I met when we were both at some IBM Watson event, and we were both on stage talking, and I was just so excited to meet you finally after all these years.
Thank you. I was excited to meet you.
Yeah, and we bonded over talking about how, in fact, like a lot of data scientists out there are perpetuating a really big problem of thinking that they don't have to work and collaborate with non-data scientists. And in particular, for our field, I think what we see is we're in the third era of big data. The first era was focusing on building tools. That's big data 1.0, where we're building the stack and the architecture of how we logistically, technically going to capture all this data. Second era of big data is looking at skills. And I think that's where the Data Incubator has been doing such important work of creating, very thoughtful, aware data scientists you have to have the people who can to use these tools, right, at scale.
Thank you.
And then we're now in big data 3.0. And that's where I think our work comes in. I don't think everyone sees the value of what we do just yet, because if you're still in the big data 2.0 era, you're just thinking, if I have the technology and I've got the data scientist, just hire my data unicorn and then that's enough. And we're saying, no, the data 3.0 is about communication. And that data is so ubiquitous. You have functions who have not been historically technical now being overseeing digital and data, all the collection of data. So in order for us to really make impact on the business at scale, you can't just have a cool data science project where everyone wants to say, I have an AI project. If you actually want it to actually show business growth, you have to have non-technical and technical people together.
Absolutely.
Communicating with data. And that's what you said too. And I think we agreed today over lunch that we've got to write a paper on this to
absolutely.
Get this
One
out
will
there.
come out.
Yes,
One will come
keep
out.
an eye on it. This is the beginning. At least we're now holding ourselves accountable because we just told the whole world however many people are watching this.
Absolutely. Just to jump on that briefly. We've written a number of pieces. Sorry, not we, but I've written a number of pieces with some co-authors, various sort of data scientists, former data scientists at WeWork, the chief innovation officer at Credit Suisse, and talking about this issue of culture, right? How do you have an innovation culture where data is a large component of that, not the only component, right? This kind of more UX-driven, human-centered design is a big component of that. Sort of pure tech is a big component of that. But there's some sort of common strand there, I think, where big corporate DNA, the DNA of these large companies that are legacy companies that aren't digital first, they don't have this built in naturally. And so there's a bit of leading a horse to water, right? There's a lot of education. There's a lot of helping them understand how to become a more agile company, how to become a more innovative company. And I think there's a lot on the culture side as well, right? Really, it's not just a top-down initiative. It has to really permeate the entire organization, right? It starts as top-down, but it can't just be what the C-suite thinks. It has to be the entire organization from the bottom up. And I know that you have a few slides about this. Do we want to maybe share that?
I don't think I have a slide about that one. But I do have a point to follow up on that. The reason why I really love that you write about culture, you're one of the few data scientists who actually say it's not just technical. You actually have to think about creating culture.
I think culture is interesting.
Yeah, and I think where we really overlap is one of the points one of the talks I give often is helping organizations understand that in digital transformation, you're often doing digital. You treat this digital thing as like a checklist, as like a thing to do. Create a task force, and let's get the right vendors in place. Let's collect all the data. Let's get our dashboards, and then we're done. And whereas I say, no, that is a output kind of approach to doing digital. What you need is being digital, which is treating it as an ongoing process, it's an ongoing practice, holistic. It involves every single function, and it's about integrating. And it's much harder to be digital. It's much easier to do digital, to feel it as like a checklist. And the organizations that succeed are the ones who know how to be digital. Being digital, where you actually are doing it, when you would then adopt all these digital tools or big data tools and bring in data scientists, it brings you closer to your customer, not farther away.
No, I can't help thinking, right, how much, I read a lot of history.
This is where we geek out. I love your historical stuff.
Well, I don't know if it's that great, right? I'm not a historian, but I read a lot of history, and something that really occurs to me is how much the Industrial Revolution and the Second World War really have influenced our view of business. That it's very much about the man month, right? You need to dig a tunnel. Well, it either takes 10 guys 2 weeks or 20 guys 1 week, and it's just simple math.
Literally guys back then,
and also literally guys back then. But that, like, when you come to a sort of more digital experience, it's not about this like centralized planning. We're going to have a very simple formula that explains this. It's about a back and forth, as you say. It's about sort of iterating. It's about seeing what works. It's about testing things empirically as opposed to sort of relying on preconceived notions. And you see this actually most, or at least let's say earliest, in this book called The Mythical Man Month. It's by one of the...
I need to read this book.
It's a great book. It's actually written about software engineering, but I think a lot of those principles apply. And it's about how, as a organization, IBM was trying to do a transformation, and they were building effectively the first modern operating system. It was the largest software project ever embarked on by any group of humans, any organization.
It's called The Mythical
Man Month.
Man Month. Okay.
And the idea is that, like, we had this holdover notion from the Second World War, right? Logistics operations, right? From the Industrial Revolution, where everything was measured in terms of man months. And so their attitude towards writing this new piece of software was, oh, well, this just requires more man months, hire more people, problem solved.
And literally there's an algorithm that was used back in World War II to calculate, actual shipments and demand and risk.
Absolutely.
And that algorithm has been transported over into management consultant and how you help organizations assign risk. But back then, this made that kind of algorithm, that kind of planning, top-down planning, made sense because there was no internet infrastructure. We had no peer-to-peer infrastructure to communicate in real time.
And the kind of problems that you were solving were very different, right? It really is just sort of like effort equals progress.
Yeah.
But we know that today, in a digital economy, it's not really effort make equals progress. It's about being smart and going in the right direction, not expending effort in the wrong direction. And that changes the game from this kind of very, well, the mythical man month kind of world into a very dynamic world, one where you need this back and forth between the quantitative and the qualitative, where you need a deep understanding, and where these kind of techniques, this is not industrial management, right? This is digital management. It's totally different, and you need these new techniques.
And I think another reason is like you need these new techniques because the problems we were solving back then were for very limited customer. It was literally back then, it was primarily white men, like white males, right? And the world has always been diverse, and now it's just that this kind of representation is showing up in the marketplace now. So companies are serving a greater representation, a range of customers. So you can't just rely, like maybe those methods did work for back then because you were designing for yourself, but you have to arrange people. So this is a statistical problem. It's like if you have a greater range of options, you have to have a greater range of solutions to choose from. And so why wouldn't there has to be things that are unknown to you that don't show up in your current data set that you have already assigned the variables to collect. And so by that very reason, if we can agree that your customers are more diverse and you want to grow your business, of course you want to do this integrated way of working with data.
So I think you had a slide you wanted to share.
Yes. Because we are supposed to like allow our audience, the whole point of this was like a webinar. It's like something I was supposed to leave them with something, right? So it's not just us talking.
So go ahead.
Do we have that slide up now? So one of the things I really wanted, I was thinking, I was talking with my business partner, Matt LeMay, and we were like, out of all the labs like we run and out of all the frameworks we teach, what would be the most valuable and quickest thing to give to your community, and which is, our community. And something that I think, that we think is very useful is one of our frameworks called integrated data thinking. And this is really core to our company. This is what we teach in terms of how do you understand, how do you actually get people from different ranges in the organization to have a shared language and shared framework around data, even if you don't have a data background. So even if you're in customer service, or if you're a C-suite leader, or if you're a data scientist or a qualitative researcher, how do we get all those people in one room? And so we created this based off of my time. I don't think we need to show it just yet because I'm not going to go there, but I just want to give a quick reason why this was created. Is I think it's very important that this is based on real context. Is it still being shown? Okay, we're back to just talking, or okay, cool. So the reason why I created this is because when I was at Nokia and I was working in R&D, and I had done all this qualitative research around the world to understand how low-income marginalized communities were using cell phones. And I was doing work in China, India, Mexico. And based off of my work, especially more intensive work in China, this was back around 2009, I realized that people didn't want to buy smartphones anymore in a few years. I had all this qualitative evidence to show that. I didn't have quantitative evidence. So I said to Nokia, I was like, look, I need to work with, back then there were data science hadn't been created yet. So I was like, look, I need to work with your BI unit, your analyst, whoever has access. I want access to all of your quantitative data. I want to create a mathematical model to start scaling out, to test out some hypothesis and look at some proxy variables of what I'm seeing of why I'm seeing indicators that people aren't going to buy your smartphone. So that means if you don't pivot and quickly change your product roadmap, you're going to go out of business in a few years. And they were just like, you are crazy. The smartphone had just come out. No one's going to want to buy the smartphone. And I was like, yeah, I know. But what I'm looking at is aspirations and emotions. And we're looking at an emerging middle class and blah, blah, blah. And they were just like, no. And I was like, of course, you're not going to see my evidence in your quantitative data set because I'm telling you something that's unknown. It's an emergent human behavior. So let's get on top of it before it actually shows up in the marketplace. But they just couldn't listen to me. And I left and I was like, what could I have done to be successful in that moment? Like I really hold myself accountable. Like I was so devastated by them not able to listen. They went out of business in a few years. And I was that crazy person who was like, I was right. I was there screaming and telling them. It wasn't just, and there were other people who identified a whole host of reasons why Nokia couldn't make it. But to me, that was like the biggest reason, right? And it's like your customers don't even want your product anymore. And you couldn't even see that. So I said, what I noticed the biggest problem was that one thing that I can solve for among many problems, but what I can solve for is that there wasn't a shared language for approaching a business question, the business problem, or the data, right? And they immediately dismissed my work because they thought that everything that was valuable is measurable. model. And because I couldn't present a mathematical model for what I was seeing, even though I wanted to create one with them, there was no shared language or even a goal to understand like what I was doing. So I was like, what can I do to bridge this gap? You know, right? In this big data-driven era when everyone's data, and I'm like, no, what you need is insights based on that data. So then that's when I created integrated data thinking. And that has become one of the core things that we teach at Sudden Compass with my business partners, Matt LeMay and Sunny Bates. And what we do is this is a framework that gives people a shared language. So I would love to just dive into this right now and to show you really quickly how even in 5 minutes, you can walk away with an understanding of how to use this. So if you look at the x-axis, we have on one end this is where you map the question, the business question. And we always say start with the business question. And if you can map this is the hardest part, is what is the business question we're trying to solve for? Is your question more on the right-hand side, which is more on the optimization level, which is you're already optimizing for something that's known. Like we need to increase our monthly active users by 10%, on whatever, wherever they are at this point in the funnel, right? Mm-hmm. Or if you're on the far left-hand side, which is you're looking at discovery and unknown stuff, which is, example of like, we're launching a product into a new market. We need to understand, these people and what their needs are. We don't know how to do this. Or we want to completely, create not just a new product, but we want to test out a new business model, right? Those are all things that are unknown. You're not optimizing something that you've already done. That requires those are vastly different kinds of methodologies that you would use. So let's just say you're on the right-hand side. That means you're already if you're on the optimization side, if you're just trying to optimize your funnel, right, and like increase conversion rates, that means then if you look at the y-axis, which on the top you have thick data, which is all the qualitative methods, and on the bottom of the axis you have quantitative data, big data, right, which is all the quantitative methods. And if you look on the right-hand side, if your question is an optimization question, you're already only limited to questions that are either qualitative or quantitative and downstream in methodology. So you're going to do either a qualitative focus group to test out some messaging, or you're going to do some kind of like A/B quantitative test, right? But you're not going to go do like an ethnographic study when you're optimizing something. You're not going to do some emergent clustering analysis of your existing quantitative data because you already know what you're looking for. And the problem, actually, I'm gonna hold on that. So that's when you're on the right-hand side. If you're left-hand side, if you're about like, let's go into a new market, then that's when you'd be like, yeah, we can do some upstream methods or qualitative like ethnographic work, or we can do some downstream quantitative methods, which is like emergent clustering analysis and looking at like what comes out of our first-party data. The problem that we see in companies is that we have like it becomes very clear when we run our labs, when we say, hey, place all your business questions, write down all your business questions. We work with executives at all levels and we say, write down your business questions, what keeps you up at night? And usually the questions, oftentimes you'll see lean on the left-hand side of like, what will happen to our business? What's the new market we should expand into? How are we going to get that next $1 billion in growth? That's all discovery level questions. And then we say, with people at all levels in the room, we say, map out all your existing data initiatives. And when we say data, it refers to qualitative and quantitative, thick and big, right? And so all their data initiatives usually fall on the right-hand side, which is all optimization in nature. And so you have tons of money invested in UX work, which is UX research is usually very downstream in nature. It's like test us like these colors and these buttons out, Yep. And all their data scientists are working on really downstream quantitative stuff. And what you see is a total disconnect. It's like you are trying to grow your business like 10x, and here you are. All your data initiatives, the way you're using data is very downstream in nature. You could be using qualitative and have a big investment in qualitative, but the way you're using qualitative is very downstream. Or what we'll see is that, there will be some organizations, might have data initiatives all around, but none of them are connected to each other. So it becomes very clear when all of this is very disconnected. And we use this framework as a way to say, look, first focus on the question you're asking, because oftentimes data scientists or even qualitative researchers, they want to jump straight to the methods. Yeah. And often executives too. And I'm like, I don't care what method, like we should not be litigating over methods right now. I want to know what your question is. And as the person who's your insight lead, then I will help you decide where we should fall on this. And this is all sprint-driven work. So we have a practice called the unlock sprint. And ideally, what you're doing is you should be running sprints all over these 4 quadrants. But as you're driving a product into execution or into the market, you should then be trending towards the right-hand side, moving into optimization, right? So in the beginning, it's like, if you're doing innovation
so how do you
stuff,
start that, right?
side.
Like you're saying that the executives are all over here on the left.
Right.
The data scientists are over there on the right. Does that mean that data scientists need to move left, and then together the data scientists and executives are moving right? Or how do you think about that?
Well, first we get everyone to understand we all have to agree on what the business question is we're trying to answer, right? And then everyone starts to realize, and our goal is not to tell them what to do. We're like, then you start to realize, oh, the people in the room are like, we need to be on the left-hand side. And the data scientists are excited because they're like, God, I've been running downstream queries when I want to do some much more creative stuff with the data set. But that means like we need more processing power. We need, bigger budgets, or we need more access to this data. But what it does is creates a shared conversation. And the data scientists start to get really excited because they're like, well, actually, we need to work with ethnographers because it might actually cost a lot to create this data set, normal, standardize it. And what happens after our labs is that data scientists get really excited because I'm like, you are working with data, you're working with people, and you should be freed to move off of your dashboard to go talk to people. So you can be working with ethnographers or the qualitative, right, researchers. And the qualitative researchers get really excited because they're like, wait, if I'm helping my business answer the question, that means I should be also working closely with data scientists. And what we do is we're saying, as you start moving towards the right-hand side, you really want to make sure you're creating a data. I mean, it's hard to explain right now, but the outcome is that you need to be creating better data, quantitative data models that reflect your human model. So the question we think that every executive, every researcher, every data person should be asking is, what is the best, how do we mathematically create a meaningful and accurate enough quantitative data model to reflect what we're seeing in the human model of behavior? And that means in order to do that, you have to work with people who are getting the emotions and stories from people.
Absolutely.
But then you have to create that, you have to scale that out mathematically. And you have to then keep testing because the world is changing, customers change. So it's not just like we do our models once a year where, some organizations keep it for much longer. It's like you need to keep updating that model.
Cool. All right, so we're conscious of the time, and we only have a few minutes left.
My God, this goes so quickly.
30 minutes is not a long time when you're having fun. One of the questions I wanted to ask, and that's been posed by the audience, is about ethics. Right? How do you integrate ethics into your curriculum? How do you integrate ethics into this broader data conversation that's not just data science or the kind of quantitative aspects of it, especially in light of things like Cambridge Analytica, the scandals of Facebook?
So this is a very important question, and there's a lot of really smart people working on this. And in particular, we're working with marketing departments. And I feel very strongly about how we are misusing and oftentimes abusing data, and that data is so political, it's so dirty. The way we acquire it, the third-party people don't even know that their data is being sold, in all these different ways. So one, we have to first realize that we are already in a very unethical space already. Like you, just by working with data, you are already in an unethical space.
Oh no!
Yes, because how do we even? If you actually traced it, there's a new blockchain company that's been announced, and I love the work that Humanity.co is working on. But they're the first company to create a market for people to own their personal data. But that's something but we haven't solved for this yet. But the quick answer is to one, realize that you're already in an unethical space of how we acquire this data, that we don't even know how we got our hands on it. Second is the way we talk about it is we have to have, we don't use the word ethics because that's such a minefield, but what we say is, David White, one of my favorite corporate poets, he calls it courageous conversations. And I think we need to have courageous conversations over how we got access to this data, how do we best use it so that we are doing good by what the human you're serving. And I think by making sure that you're always putting the human at the center, that's how you start to have human conversations.
It goes back to that human-centered design.
Which means everyone needs to first step, it requires you looking a customer in the eyes. We will go into organizations and how can we even talk about ethics and data when we have a customer centricity index, and where we can index organizations on how customer centric they are. One of the questions we ask is, When is the last time you looked a customer in the eye in their own, context, not bring them into some focus group with mirrors or through a dashboard? When was the last time you looked at a customer, a person in the eye, and just talked to them and listened to them also and interact with them? Maybe not even talk, just, interact. And many organizations, you'd be surprised that the average is anywhere from 3 to 5 years.
Wow.
And that to us is unacceptable. Is that if you're a data scientist, I don't care. If you're an executive, you need to be looking at people in the eye. And that's the beginning of a conversation on ethics, because then you start to be like, well, ethics isn't this weird meta,
it's not abstract. It becomes incredibly real and personal.
Exactly.
So yeah. Okay. One last question. And this is actually to both of us. So it's a two-part question, so I'm just going to pose it. You can take whichever half you want to answer, and I will try to come up with the other half. All right. So can you give an example of kind of analysis that you've been a part of that either goes from the quantitative to the qualitative or qualitative to quantitative?
Mm-hmm. Oh, this is a really great example that we saw in one of our partners, which is a Fortune 50 CPG company located in the Midwest. And we love telling this story because they wanted to start selling laundry detergent to an urban area. And the reason why they said, we historically are in the Midwest, so we know our customer, large family, large sizes. But when they did some analytics, their analytics or BI team said, if you aggregate all of the top 10 urban areas in the United States, it actually forms the size of a market, and it makes more sense to go after them as an aggregate. Mm-hmm. And so quantitatively, it showed that this made sense financially, right? And so they had a whole go-to-market strategy. They worked with their agency, and they had all these plans. And then we looked at them and we said, you don't even understand your customer, and you're going to use the same way of selling that you've always done historically. Do you even know how people do laundry in urban areas? Then they made a certain assumption, and all of their marketing and all of the messaging, and they're about to buy media against this creative plan, which is that doing laundry sucks and we'll make it better for you. And then and I said, look, just give me a cross-functional executive team mixed with your marketing people. I want a salesperson also, and I want someone from your agency side. Come to New York City, leave your Midwest fancy, large laundry rooms, and come to New York City, live in an Airbnb for just 3 days and bring your dirty clothes, and we're going to do your laundry. And they're like, really? Can't we just have a vendor do that for us? We'll just hire a researcher. I'm like, no, you need to do this yourself. And it was transformational, because even just after 1 day of doing their laundry in a laundromat in New York City, they realized, holy shit, that the people who do their laundry actually like doing their laundry, because the laundromat in New York City is a social space. It's one of the few spaces we have left in our digital era where you can meet serendipitously strangers in real time. And we brought them to laundromats that had a tiki bar, that had arcade machines, pinball machines. They were selling balloons. I mean, there's all these things you could do. And people were like, no, that's my one protected. It's like going on a flight. I can read a book. It's a one time I can shut off. And people were getting dressed up to go to the laundromat because guess what? It's a physical Tinder space. And so I'm like, you guys were going to have all this marketing message and assume that people don't like doing their laundry in New York City, when in fact, people love doing it, and it's a social space. And so they changed their entire marketing plan. We worked with them to create qualitative insights. And then we said, let's create an ad buying, a programmatic formula that we can start testing messaging in real time, trigger the formulas, and figure out how do we reach the right customer at the right time for personalization. This is the way we can use ad tech, properly. And so it was this very tight loop of working quantitatively. We worked, the question was, how do you launch a new market? So you're on the unknown side, right? And then we did a quick sprint of ethnography, which is just 1 day. And when we say ethnography, we're not talking about 1 month or a few weeks. Yeah. 1 day sprint, they were already convinced. They're like, okay, we're wrong. We got to redo our things. Then we said, okay, let's create an ad buying. Let's get to insight. Let's create an ad buying model. Okay, let's quickly test this messaging. So we go down into the optimization. Let's do let's do a quick focus group of hey, we pulled them in. We pulled 2 people in for our focus group. We did it all within 3 days. Within 3 days, we were able to move across all 4 quadrants, and then we were able to come up with an entire new marketing strategy. And it was one of the most successful product launches. We were able to bring $300 million in revenue in just 2 quarters.
Wow.
Which is pretty amazing.
That's a really great story.
I want to hear it. I want to hear it.
No, actually, I was going to say, unfortunately, we are out of time,
No.
so we'll have to continue this conversation later. But this has been an amazing conversation. I think a little different from the ones we usually have, but actually incredibly fascinating, incredibly engaging. So I want to thank you for coming over and actually dropping by.
In person.
In person.
The first, setting a new trend.
That's right. I want to thank our audience. I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as we have. And just a quick reminder that if you're interested in learning more about our free fellowship for PhDs and master's students who are looking to enter the industry as data scientists, you can apply online at thedataincubator.com. And if you're looking to either hire data scientists or train data scientists as a company, you can also go to our website, thedataincubator.com. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Bye.